I suppose. And phase 2 consists of, well, number 1, tidying up my workspace, getting all my leaves that I cut off, and then I just take away all of this trash. Nice to have a big garbage can next to you. You'll go through a lot of stuff, a lot of cut-offs. Okay, so now I have 5 of these very pretty, a little bit firmer in their material. I actually like it a lot. And the one thing I'm gonna say about the floral arrangement in general is, this is gonna sit on the center of a table, not unlike where it is already, and I am sitting in a chair that's similar to what a dining or a shibari chair would be at an event. And height-wise, what I'm going to be seeing the most of is basically what's right here in my sight line and my vision. So what's on the tippy top is important that it's covered, but not necessarily so important for where the interest of the arrangement is created. So what I've done strategically on all of these arrangements that we've made is to kind of keep the bulk of now all of these little individual sweet aspects of the composition within that framework. Yes, I definitely put some in the top, and you'll see the cute little baby's breath and this little one poking out at the top. But really, my focus is on this edge circular band from the bottom up to 2/3 of the way up the overall arrangement. So I'm going to start with this one by finding my bigger gaps. We know for sure that this is a big gap, so we need to put one there straight away. Bingo. Love it. And I do like to have one of those kind of at the top. One of the tricky things I want to tell you about keeping those leaves on, or even sometimes a petal from one of the other flowers, you can run into a scenario where you're trying to stick the stem into the styrofoam and it'll feel unusually difficult. It's generally because one of those leaves or one of those petals of the other flowers has laid down on the styrofoam, and the stem is touching the petal or the leaf first, and you're trying to press through that. So check to make sure if you feel a unusual resistance, you may have that going on, and that's not any good. It's going to end up creating a larger hole in the styrofoam than what is necessary. So I've only got 5 of these, so I got to be strategic in where I place them. So I've got one here, one here. You see there's a pretty nice gap right there, so we're going to put one right here. I also like the leaves on these are a little bit darker in color, so that little tiny dark color pop right there is also very nice as well. So I've got 2 more. I'm looking around and I see here is a pretty substantial gap, so I'm going to go ahead and get one right in there to that spot. And again, you can tweak the direction just slightly with the wire by bending it the way you want it to go. Really helps you get a lot of dimension overall, because you kind of want the heads of the flowers going in all different sorts of directions. Just looks good. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'm going to try and sneak one in maybe right about there. It's looking good to me. Fortunately, as you go along in the process, you can also change the placement if you don't exactly like what you've done. Now, we've got all of our peonies in the form, and you could literally stop right here. This would be a floral arrangement that no one could really scoff at. It's nice and full. There's not any major gaps. You don't see the styrofoam sticking through anywhere. And it could certainly be an acceptable overall floral arrangement. We've decided to go just a little bit beyond this with all the other elements that we've procured. So let's start with the baby's breath. And so I want to show you that I already have a bunch of it done here. But this came with this nice little raffia banding on it. And we're just going to take that off. And just to show you how these things are done, there's an outer rim that if you just grab it nice and firmly and pluck it off, they pluck right off. So I'm going to take that around and I'm going to pluck those easy ones off. Then it gets you down to a center core that is 6 more stems or stalks of the baby's breath. And it's held together by a pretty thick melted piece of plastic. And so I've got my craft scissors that are pretty hardy craft scissors, and you got to muscle it to be able to cut through it. And then I break it down to 3 and then individually go in and cut those. And so that one bunch of baby's breath, if it is baby's breath, it's what I'm calling it. It's close, very close looking to what baby's breath looks like. Gives you 12 stems, which is perfect. I've used 12 on each one of these arrangements. So, but the thing that I've done with the baby's breath is that, as you can see, it is spaced out down the length of the center stem. And I didn't like that very much because I want the impact to be a little bit more clustered. So again, like I showed you how to do with the roses earlier by pushing the leaf up to, creates a nice frame around the flower. I am now doing the same thing with my baby's breath. So I end up with nice long center stem, but that little cluster, fluffy little pom-pom at the top, because that's what's going to peek out of my flowers. So I've already done that to a whole stack here, but I did want to show you how I'm doing it. Again, you could be quite satisfied with yours like this. It's just my particular taste or desire to have them to look more like this. Now, this stem is just barely long enough to do what I need it to do to peek out. So I'm not going to cut anything. In fact, I am just going to cut just a tiny little bit because, again, I like them on an angle to have a little bit of that spear effect going into the styrofoam. So what I'm going to do is place all of my baby's breath, what I'm deeming them. And if you look in the arrangement over here to your right, you can see that I have placed them very liberally throughout the entire arrangement. Now, one of the things I've done on the bottom level is to give the arrangement some of that spillover, almost a little bit of drooping or dangling effect, I'm coming into it from up underneath like this so that it ends up sort of dangling out over the edge. For storage later on, that could be a little tricky, especially if you're going to be storing these on a shelf, because if it's dangling down below the surface level of the bottom of the styrofoam, it's going to probably end up pressing up. So just be careful with that. You may ultimately want to store your arrangements for protection on something, like on a box or something elevated, so those pieces that are dipping down aren't going to be pressed on all the time. Okay, here we are. We're back at our baby's breath. So what I'm doing is I'm going almost every 2 flowers with the baby's breath. I have on most of the others, which is fine because we've got the cones and we've also got the little dainty berry ones that we're using as well. So I'm going to continue with getting my baby's breath throughout the whole arrangement before I move to working with any of the other elements. As the arrangement begins to shape up, you can see very easily where you need to go with each of the items that you place into the arrangement, because you're basically filling up all the spots that are kind of open. And I just kind of twirl this around like a lazy Susan, which allows me to find out exactly where I need to go with each stem. Sometimes to get the right placement, you might actually have to force a spot. So whereas these flowers were very close together just now, I took the head of this one and just went and bent it slightly, going away to actually create a pocket. So sometimes you're not just trying to only fill up pockets, but you actually may end up having to create your own pocket to be able to have the equal distribution of all of your elements throughout your flower arrangement. You get better at it as you go along. It's been quite a while since I have endeavored to do some arrangements, and this is the 8th one of 8. So I finally felt confident enough to get up on some video footage for you on the last one. At least on the last pink one. I've got a whole load of white ones that I have to do next. But it's a little bit of a discovery. So you find your footing, and then you just go for it. I can tell you it's been a lot of fun, and it makes me wonder why I haven't done more, but that will all change because I've enjoyed it a lot, and I'm gonna do more. So I'm gonna just spin it around, give it a nice look here. I can see that I probably need another stem of it right here. Like this. Should be close. Now, after we've got all of the baby's breath in, the next element that I go to is this sort of heathery looking one. And this one's kind of tricky because, again, it's on a combined bunch. And so you've got to pull all of these individual pieces down as deeply to the base as you can to cut that off to get your long lengths. I have already done that with a few, but I'm going to go ahead and continue it with this one just to kind of show you. So you can see I've pulled them all down. You come back and you just harvest them right off of the center here. That's Milton over there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, because these are actually pretty long, longer than what most of the locations require. So I've gone in and found the center point and I'm cutting them in half. So now I got 2 out of 1. There's a lot of bang for your buck. But what ends up happening is your cut is so close to the first petal or the first piece of your stem that you need to pop off some of them. You can see I've got a whole pile of ones that I've popped off that I don't quite yet know what I'm going to do with, but I'm sure I'll figure something out. So now you've got more of a post, but you've got these 2 little babies sticking out here that are going to impede you from being able to sink it into the styrofoam. So I come here with my cutter and I just take those off. Just nip that off. They're plastic, they come off real easy. So now you've got a nice long depth or length of stem to go ahead and start putting them in where you want them. Now, I've gone back, and as you can see over in the other arrangements, if you do a close-up there, I've gone back and put a stem of the heathery literally right in conjunction with the baby's breath. So everywhere there's baby's breath coming out, there's now going to be a bit of the heathery part. Now I don't want it to be so much coming out everywhere. You're creating now the density of the overall composition. So some of them may tuck in deeper. You may just see just a little peck of it. That's okay. And like this one is hanging out a little bit further. The taller ones are the ones that I need to peck out from the top. I leave the entire stem so that I've got the length that I need in order to go as long as what it needs to go. And so you just repeat that process. That there's a little pink sprig by every one of my baby's breaths, and it looks like I've only missed one right there. So we've got one more to do. Now we've put in 4 elements. We put in our light and dark pink peony. We put in the stylized peony, which has a little bit more of a blushy, peachy color to it. That's 2. We've put in the baby's breath. That's 3. And now we've put in the little heather. That's 4. What do we have left? We have left our rose bunch that we harvested earlier in the process, which has given us 5 rose buds, 3 cones, and 2 little berries. So now we're going to fill in where we feel like they will be best served, remembering that I want to keep the majority of my interest. Everything up above here is already as good as it needs to be, because no one's going to be standing up and looking over the tops of your centerpieces. The majority of your interest should be around the outside perimeter that tricky thing that I talked to you about earlier today was, because this had a base that they all joined in and we could not get these stems any longer, we cut it down to as deeply as we could. When I find, this is the perfect example, an area like this that I want to put a flower in right there, but my stem isn't long enough to reach down and go to the styrofoam, I take one of the stems of some of the other ones that I've cut off of, and we literally will come in here and we will adhere the shorter stem to the longer stem by wrapping it around. You're basically marrying the shorter stem to the long one. And voila, I now have a longer stemmed rose, which I didn't have a second ago. You can fluff these out to give them as much girth as what you want, or you can leave them more as a bud. I'm going to fluff it out a bit and go ahead and find where I want it to be. Just like that. I love it. Okay, so we've got 5 of these to work with. Again, I want to keep my interest kind of low, where I'm going to see it the most. Marry those in. And then now is where you start really looking at your overall arrangement and seeing what maybe needs to be sunk deeper, what maybe needs to be adjusted, and perfecting the overall effect of what you've created. Now's really the kind of the fun part, getting it all fine-tuned, because we're almost done. Okay. Nope, I put the berries lower. Okay. Let's find out. Maybe put one right here. The other thing that we've done very clever throughout the process of being in the event business is create these beautiful centerpieces with the silk flowers, and somewhat to, I'm actually going to take this flower out, it's bothering me, I want to sink it a little deeper, but it has leaves on it, so I need to take those off to be able to sink it into the styrofoam a little bit deeper than what it was. What I was saying is oftentimes we will merge silk flowers with fresh flowers. Now normally we don't do it in the same arrangement. I have in the past, after having a beautiful arrangement like this, gotten fresh flowers, cut them off. It's only going to be for a couple of hours for the event. They're going to be pulled away and pulled out and thrown away anyway at the end of the event, and just literally pluck them in throughout the surface, 5 or 6 into a silk arrangement, because what happens is that fresh flower will give off a lovely scent, and so it's a little bit of event magic and some trickery that you have these great big beautiful luscious arrangements, and there are fresh flowers in them, so it gives the impression or the overall feeling that they're all fresh. The other thing that I like to do even better than that is with the arrangements that they're the taller arrangements that no one's really going to reach up and touch, such as the one as you see in the background on that tall table there. No one will reach up and touch that. Go all silk with those. Anything that goes low on the table, more petite ones, that's where we then introduce the fresh flowers to have the scent in the room. Okay. So we've got one more, whoops, one more rose, and I'm just going to kind of spin this around and see where I've placed my other ones to make a decision where I should put that one. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Where did I put my 4th one? Is there. I think. there's a good distance between this one and this one here, so I think I'm going to come right in here and nestle it in just right there. Bend this one just a little to the left so that it has more presence right there. Okay. All the roses are in. I've got 3 berries and 3 cones and 2 berries. Now in all the other arrangements, I've strategically come down to the lower level, and where you have these items peeking out, I've gone in between those for the most part. So if you got one here and one here, I'm going to take this berry and I'm going to put this berry here. Okay? And then I'm going to go a little bit further. Cone. I keep saying berry. And now I'm going to take the berry and do the same thing. Just sneak it in right there, just for that little added element of difference as you go around the lower level, which is the greatest part of the floral arrangement that the eye is going to be seeing. So we go back to the cone, and then we alternate to the berry. And then back to the cone. And then what I'm prone to do is to get up and sort of do not just a spinning 360, but actually walking all the way around it, just looking at the overall dome, the overall shape, to make sure that I have created a very lovely composition. I'm seeing only one flower that's bothering me right now, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust it. I'm going to turn it around and show it to you. Maybe you can see from here that the depth of this is pretty significant in comparison to this, and there's a relatively large gap right there. We've got plenty enough interest going on in the arrangement with all of these little doodads that we've got sorted out throughout it. So what I'm going to do to take and close in that gap is just take this flower out. Probably need to clip it a little bit shorter. And I'm just going to sink it a little bit more deeply so that the flower itself closes up the gap altogether. And that's the part that you just kind of have to discover as you go along in your learning process and building a really nice centerpiece for a wedding or an event. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please like it. Send us comments. Let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to help. This is Marie at Le Fée Dodo. Thank you very much and have a great and fun time on your next floral arrangement.